Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David E.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Chaminade University.
Aloha, and thanks so much for tuning in on this Wednesday morning, November 17th. I'm Ryan Kalei Suji, joined by Yanji Denise, and this is Spotlight Hawaii on the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. Yanji, this morning we'll be talking about a topic that we've been discussing in the community for years now, spotlighting our rail project happening here on Oahu.
We've been talking about it for some time, and we will probably be talking about it for years to come. Joining us this morning is HART Board Chair and former Hawaii Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You joined the board back over the summer, I believe it was July, and we had you on right when you took the helm there. And at the time, you said that you were still getting to go through the budget and getting to know sort of what contracts had been agreed upon and what was still outstanding. Now you've had a few months to look over all of that. What's your just overall take on the project as it stands right now?
You know, I think that the problem that we have is that we have given the public, and this is over the period of time, so many different numbers that the people are beginning to wonder whether we know what we're talking about, because we've said we've got a huge shortfall. Then we're now saying, you know, it really may not be as large as that. Maybe there's cost savings that we can do. So I can honestly tell you that the number of 3.5 billion, which was the deficit that we were looking at, or the shortfall we're looking at in March of 2021, just of this year, is actually reduced. And you're going to hear more and more testimony about that amount. And also the different kinds of efforts that have gone into reducing the amount of money that we may need on this project, and what can be done or what should be done to actually address the shortfalls that we're facing.
You know, there's a lot of different topics regarding just this rail project, but I think one of the things that a lot of people in the community are talking about is where this rail line is going to. Can you give us an update on where the debate is right now about where we are going to be able to afford the project to go to? Will it essentially end at Middle Street? Is there enough money, and what are the plans to get it to Ala Moana, as many who support the project are continuing to advocate for? What are your thoughts on what you're learning through this process about where this train will end up?
Well, you know, that is the question. First of all, let's get rid of Middle Street. There is more than enough money to get to Middle Street and past Middle Street as well. Where the 800-pound gorilla is in the room is actually, for me, a very frustrating issue, because when I was on the board in 2015, I already had raised the fact that, you know, the HART administrative staff at that time had not properly calculated the cost of undergrounding on Dillingham Boulevard. So Dillingham was selected as the route, but it's about 1.6 miles, and that is the major cost. So depending on how HART addresses that segment will determine how far the project can go and what kind of cost savings. So you've heard references to Mauka Shift, which is to move the guideway away from Dillingham, away from the 138 kV lines, which is really the source of the problem. There was also a cost that if they continued down Dillingham, there was a 42-inch water main. 42, yeah, I mean, you know, that's huge, to straddle on both sides, because you can't move that water main. It's an active source of water, so that they would have had to redesign how the rail would go, and they'd have to straddle that. And then you have to figure out how you're going to underground the 138 kVs plus all the other types of utilities on that strip. It was probably the worst place you could possibly place a rail line. So there was now talks that we're going to Mauka shift the guideway, and leave everything else in place. That's going to be a substantial savings. So what the the Hart administration, Lori Kahikina and her group has been able to do is they've been able to get all of the necessary regulatory type approvals done from phases 2 to 6, which is basically all the way to Ala Moana. They're going to issue phases 2 to 4. One is still the 800-pound gorilla, which is none other than the Dillingham corridor, 1.6 miles. So that's what the problem is going to be. How far the rail line is going to go is really all money. And that's what we are talking about here is where is the money going to come from? And that is, as right now, as we speak, the budget committee at the city council is meeting, and they're trying to figure out whether they will share in the 3% TAT increase with Hart, because it's not a given that they're going to do anything for Hart. So Hart has to make the case that this is something that is doable. And that is really the answer to your question, which is how much money do we have, and how much, and are the estimates, we call it the EAC, the estimates at completion, correct, so that we can see how far we can go. So there'll be different presentations, and I think there'll be one on at City Council today at the Budget Committee hearing, where Laurie will set out exactly how much money she thinks she has, how much the cost is, and that's always going to be the issue. One, the cost, and two, how much money she thinks she has. COVID, of course, affected the revenue source because, most of the revenue, if not almost 100% of the revenue, really comes from GET and TAT. So, and there's some money put in there by the city, but that's the major source. So when we had COVID hit, you lost the GET and the TAT. But this past legislative session, what the legislature did was they did take away the 103 million that all of the counties shared. Honolulu shared 45 million of that amount, and then said, okay, you have the right to implement your own 3%, which is where we're at here. It was expected, of course, that Honolulu and Maui would get a substantial increase in the TAT income if they implemented it. All the other counties have implemented, except for Big Island and I believe Oahu.
Well, let's talk about that money then. You say that 3.5 billion is too high an estimate for the budget shortfall. What is a more realistic number from what you've seen?
Well, we're still working on it, and as I explained to you off air, is that the Hart Board. By the way, the Hart Board is the policymaking body of the rail project, of the whole rail project. So in 2016, the people of the City and County of Honolulu instituted a charter amendment which gave that authority to the board. So the board has created what we call a PIG, a permitted interaction group, where more or less than the majority can get together and discuss these figures. It looks to me right now that even with the figures of the Hart administration, that's what we call the engineers and all of them, that they've gone from 3.5 to at least 2 billion. So it's a reduction of 1.5 billion from March to now. We believe, and this is the Hart Board, that we're working on this. It doesn't become official until the board adopts a position. But it looks like it may even be reduced further by an additional at least 500, potentially 500 million. So these are what we're looking at, but it's all based on assumptions, snapshots in time, and what we basically believe the amount of income will be that's coming in. And as you know, our financing is going to be higher because though the FTA was supposed to be a partner in this, they stopped giving money at $750 million. So there's 3 more what we call tranches still outstanding that were due from about 2015, and that's 744 million, which is out. And until we get that money, the Hart is going to have to bond finance until all this money comes in. So that's all part of the equation of how much money do we have in the end.
And in your discussions with those on the budget committee of the city council, does it sound like they are going to make this accommodation of this new TAT tax that the city is able to bring in and having a portion of that go towards rail? And if not, What other alternatives are there if it does not look like they would allow this?
I think that there's a commitment, but you're not going to know anything until they take the final vote. And having been in the legislature or Congress, I will never second guess how people who are in the decision-making positions will act. But I believe that there is support. The question is how much support. So, it can range from 0.5 of, when I say 0.5, I'm talking about the 3%. So 0.5, not 0.5 of the 3%, but 0.5. So 1.5 would be 50% if you take a 1.5% of the TAT. I think it ranges from 0.5 to, I don't know if they're at 2 yet, because the one thing you got to understand is they're, like most people are saying, hey, we are not going to throw good money after bad. So you guys, HART, show us that this is doable. And I think that's a highly reasonable position. So the onus falls on us to say where the money comes from, what we think we need, and will this shortfall, if they help us fund the shortfall, how far will that go? And right now, that's fluid because we're still battling among ourselves over, okay, how much is that actual shortfall? I hope what the people realize is that discussion is going on, and that discussion is being there, and that we hope that the transparency with which, when we finally reveal what the PIG report is going to be, and we show where we think the numbers are, that people will have better confidence in what HART is doing. But we do know that they're going to go, well, how can you be in March 3.5 and you be at this figure now? So what are you guys not doing right? I mean, we have to explain that. That's legitimate, and we have to stand for that.
When Lori Kahikina had appeared on this program, I think around the time that you came on, or it was early summer, she had said that there was a hope, at least, that part of the rail could be up and running and that people could start riding it, that once people actually could get on the train, that there would be more buy-in from the community, because there is this distrust of the project, I think in large part because it feels so sort of, foreign, just sort of like conceptual, but we're just spending money on it and getting nothing from it yet. But now we have this issue with the wheels not being able to match up with the tracks. Realistically, how close are we to a fix on that? And when do you think people can actually start to ride this train?
I'd like to believe that some portion of the ridership is going to be able to take place sometime next year, maybe mid-year at the latest. And the issue of what we call the frogs and the tracks and the welding on the tracks, that there is a resolution in that there was an independent study done by an organization called the TTCI, which said, okay, you can replace the wheels, so you don't have to do anything more with the tracks, and then you weld where the frogs are for now, so that you kind of make it so that the wheels can go over it. But people think it's really strange, but those are going to wear down. But in the meantime, we will have the new wheels on there. The other complication in this whole process is that the operations and maintenance of rail by the 2016 Charter Amendment resulted with the fact that the DTS, which is of the city, takes over operations and maintenance. So the people said, HART, you don't get to do that anymore. So we're going to give it to the city. So they've got to interface between HART, the DTS, Hitachi, and figure out, okay, when do we move all of this? So when is it safe to move the operation maintenance? So the decision to run is really going to be that combination, and the running of it is going to be DTS, same people who run the bus and handy van.
So with that decision of when it ultimately starts, that will lie with the city and county and their decision and DTS about when to move forward with this, because at some point it's almost like, HART and the authority will hand over the keys, so to speak, to a certain point, and it's really up to the city to decide when they want to start. Is that accurate?
Well, yes and no, because technically the handing over is in phases. They've already agreed. There's like an MOU between the city and HART as to when they would do it. So it's a very stringent thing in the interest of safety, which we can all understand and appreciate. So in the interest of safety, we need to have certain tests done. And when DTS is on behalf of the people of the City and County of Honolulu is satisfied that in fact it can run, that's when they will take a phase of it. And it probably is going to go Kapolei to the stadium. And that will be the run. And then after, the what we call AGS, which is the airport system, is the one to Middle Street. And that's about 90-something% completed. So we'll be able to see, at some point it'll go further, but I think they're going to do it in phases in terms of the acceptance of the system from HART by the city. And that's what they got to do before they operate it. But I'm still very confident that I think you'll see some form of, whether they collect revenue or not is something else, but some form by the middle of next year. It was supposed to be this year, but the frogs kind of interfered with that, as well as the welding and the fact that we still don't have welders per se. But I think that's all going to be worked out, hopefully by the end of the year, the welders part.
I'm interested, I want to follow up on something you said, was that forget Middle Street. You think that we're not stopping at Middle Street no matter what?
I think you're not stopping at Middle Street no matter what. There's more than sufficient funds to do that. And ironically, when I was on the board the first time and I was chair, there was the issue of stopping at Middle Street. So there was a study done then that we weren't gonna, that what it would take. And at that point, we only had $6.8 billion. That was the first GET increase from the original. And at that point, we had to sort of consider stopping at Middle Street if we didn't get additional funding. So subsequent to that, we had Act One, which at the estimate in terms of the amount of funding that would come in between GET, TAT, and the federal funding was about $9.2 billion. So when you take the project as potentially, depending on which numbers you look at, 10.6 to or 11.3, depending on what the total amount is that and whose estimates you like, it takes you way past Middle Street. Probably as far as just short of maybe downtown. And that means you pass Middle Street, you pass Kalihi, you pass Chinatown, and then you go to downtown. So after downtown, there are really only 3 stations left to Ala Moana, and that's Civic Center and 2 others, and then Ala Moana. So that that's why I think forget Middle Street, because there is, or I believe there is, sufficient funds now to even get us pretty close to Middle Street. And that's with the expectation that we were going to do certain types of changes within it. But like I said, until the board meets and accepts this is just me from what I can see from the documents that we've gone through. But you can imagine it's been the one thing that HART doesn't want to be responsible for is ending rail somewhere that's non-functional. So it's going to be that. But we need to get to the point where we see all the monies that are coming in. Hopefully that council will contribute a portion of that. And where does that leave us and how far do we get down with that? And it's, it's just a matter of looking at that. And when we did this in 2016, we looked at, do we P3 all the stations? The stations to Ala Moana? Do we build to Ala Moana, the guideway? There are all these different kinds of ways of looking at it. Or do you drop stations along the way? So, those are things too. So if we're, depending on how short we are, do we need as many stations between, for example, Civic Center and Ala Moana? Do you need all these subsequent, the little stations in between? What do you need? And so those are the questions that it can be answered, and it may bring some variation of it, may bring us to Ala Moana, but it's going to be how much money do we think? Because remember, the difference between the funding source for HART and what the federal government gave us, and that's all they do is they give you a grant. So it's $1.55 billion, no matter what, that's what you're going to get. What the GET gave us is a percentage of whatever is collected. So that's why the fact that when we had COVID, it affected it. But at the same time, when you think about the amount of GET growth that we've experienced. And, just look at the couple of months when tourism came back. Yeah, it's a phenomenal, and TAT is a phenomenal tax. I jokingly always mention to the mayor and the managing director, if you guys would go collect the transit vacation rentals, we would have more income. But those are the types of things that we have to look at, and we have to really anticipate. And so it's really a fluid situation, and it's the ability to recognize what it takes to get to a particular point, and also what it is that we need to have in terms of the funding and how realistic not only the projections are, but are we too conservative? Not that we want to be too aggressive, but have we been too conservative? And I think that what Laurie would be the first to say is that she was very conservative when she came up with the $3.5 billion, as evidenced now as we look at the numbers.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Laurie Kahikin, of course, in this interim role. What are your thoughts in working with her in these first few months? Is this something that you believe that is a position that she should continue on with? Are you open to possibly opening up that, of course, position to others who may be interested in taking on as the leader of this project?
I think the HART board has already preliminarily determined that, and we've had a vote on this in public, is that Laurie Kaikina will become will drop the acting, and she'll be the executive director, and that we're just waiting on the final drafting, I think, on the provisions of the contract to vote on. But I think you can be sure that she will be the executive director.
Okay. And then this is a question from the audience on your job prospects. Ms. Hanabusa, will you be running for lieutenant governor or governor in the next election? It's Hanabusa time. That's what Heidi has to say. Any news on that front this morning?
Definitely not lieutenant governor. No. Thank you, Heidi. It's nice to. She actually she must be a Donalyn De La Cruz or Donabusa fan, because it's Hanabusa time was one of her skits, I believe. So Heidi, I will tell Donalyn or Donabusa that you're watching, and you must be a fan, because Hanabusa time was that skit. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Just to follow up, one of the things that you have learned, obviously, in your role, you've been involved with this project at the beginning before you, of course, went back into public service, and now you find yourself back leading HART once again. What has been some of the biggest things, maybe surprising things that you have learned during your time back, and some of the things that it's kind of been eye-opening for you, knowing that you've been working and have had a hand in this project for some time now?
I got to tell you, one of the pleasant surprises, and not to say anything about my colleagues before, but I was I was chair for just a short period of time back then, is that I am amazed as to how engaged the members of the HART board are, and the diversity is really their strength. It's a diverse group of people, and I have to tell you, no one has failed to step up whenever called upon to do it. So we have two pigs going on. One is on the rules of the pig, the rules of the HART, because we are charter, but we have also the mandate to implement rules to affect what the charter says. And in addition to that, it's just that's been a real pleasure, is doing a very difficult time, but knowing that they're all willing to pitch in. And I'd like even like city council and people to realize, the board is an all volunteer board, and they don't get compensated for any of the time and effort they put in. And, all you get is criticism a lot of the time. And yet they're willing to do it because they believe in this project. And that's what I find to be so amazing. We haven't had, when I was on before, I don't think we have the challenges that we have now, which is we're 3/4 of the way done, guys. We got a 1/4. It's the worst quarter of the mile of the project to go. 4 miles. That's, people are scratching their heads and saying, how can you cost us $2-point-something billion to go 4 miles, And that's what you hear, the end it. But because they're saying that it's too much. But it's amazing to work with a group of people who are so intent on seeing this done for the people of the city and county of Honolulu. And that's what I think has been the real blessing of this whole situation coming back, is the dedication that you see, irrespective of the criticism and everything else that we face, that we as a group are going to get it done. They are the policy making body. They're the absolute final say on this project as far as it's been laid out, and they are all there to work together on this. And I think that's amazing.
You mentioned the criticism. We're almost out of time, but what would you say to the public? Because there are so many people who just say enough already, tear it down, turn it into a walkway, turn it into another bus lane. People who are just really fed up with it. And you mentioned at the top, the financial discrepancy between 3.5 or $2 billion. It does make people have a lot of mistrust of this project. How do we get the public, or how do you get the public as the HARP board chair, to buy back into this?
The only thing that, that's individual for each group of people, right? There's some people who never liked rail to begin with. The challenge are those who supported rail, who, like a good friend of mine says, I've always been there for rail, but I'm beginning to feel a little bit tired of doing that. So we need to energize people, and really the public confidence has got to be with the fact that maybe you guys can make a difference. So that's why I've said, and the board has taken the position that we need to be upfront with the public. We need to answer their questions as best as we can. And we need to say, hey, yes, it wasn't perfect. We're not saying we were perfect. It wasn't perfect. And we could always pass the buck and say, well, we weren't on the board then, whatever it may be. But we need to own it. And we need to realize that the only way we're going to make life better is if it's done. And I think the problem is people look at rail as a complete transportation kind of response, but it's not. The rail is really a lifestyle changer. And I tell people who keep telling me, this is ridiculous, I said, it's really not for you. It's not for me. It's for the generations to come, because this is going to change the way they live. And I said, you cannot deprive the generations to come the opportunity of the choice, because I said, I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived in a transit-oriented development. I know what it's like when it's done right. And I watched the millennials, as I say, and how engaged they are. They don't want a car. They don't want to pay for any kind of monthly payments on the car. They don't want to pay for insurance. They don't want to pay for parking. They want mobility. And they want to, zip cars. They want to ride share. It's a different generation. So I tell people, the problem I think government has always had is we've decided what we think you want and what you need. Go listen to them. See how they want to live. See what they want. And that's where I think then the focus on rail and what rail represents changes. Look at what a transit-oriented development looks like that's done right. Go on the web and go look at this thing called the Wharf, which is where I lived, and see it. See how they did it. Of course, my criticism of the Wharf is they sell the Potomac like a great view. Look at what we have. We have great views here, but this is what it's all about. It's about the future, and it's about investing in the future for those who are going to live that future.
Before we let you go, I do want to follow up, because we're still getting comments about this. You said you for sure not running for lieutenant governor, but there are comments here that saying that you should run for governor. Is that something that you're considering?
Tell Heidi thank you. I'll give it thought.
It's not just Heidi. There are others in there as well.
I'll give it thought. It's like what my kids say, maybe isn't no. That doesn't sound like a no.
Well, they say a politician should never say never and should never say no. So let's leave it at that.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning and give us an update on this project. No doubt we will be continuing to have this discussion for some time now, but we appreciate the update. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha. Well, great to get that update. And wow, what a difference. That $3.5 billion estimated budget shortfall could be as low as $2 billion or even less, she says, as they start to go through those numbers and really drill down into what the options are. That Dillingham corridor, as she mentioned, is really the money pit, if you will, and they're trying to figure out how they move the guideway so that it is it doesn't cost that 3.5 billion or beyond. Interesting to hear from her also that we could be able to ride the train as early as next year. Of course, the hope was this year, but given the challenges with just the mechanics of it, that's not going to happen. Obviously, we're in November, so we're not going to have it in 2021, but it does sound, she said, like mid-year next year, we could see some ridership begin.
Yeah, look, sounding very optimistic about getting riders from Kapolei at least to Aloha Stadium and utilizing a part of the route. And she even expanded it along more, saying that the portion that is near the airport is about 95% done. And so that would maybe be the next section after. So definitely, there are a lot of people out there who especially live on the west side of the island that see this project, that see it in their backyard and see it not moving. And I think a lot of people would like to see at least some form of the rail running at some point in time. She also mentioned the challenges with, of course, finding money to fill the hole and that gap for this last quarter, and saying a lot of that will also be determined on what the city council decides with the TAT funding and how they're going to restructure that 3% that they are now entitled to through visitors that are coming in, and if the city will allow a portion of that to go to this project.
Yeah, and Lori Kahikina has been making her case to the city council this week, and it sounds from all accounts that they will change that title from interim to permanent director of this project. She, of course, took over temporarily, but has been diving in, really restructuring the staff there. Lots of layoffs coming out as they try to tighten their belts over there. Very interesting to hear just about how the board is working. You know, she did mention that it is an all volunteer board and they are working overtime right now to try to get this project, these last 4 miles, finished, and that all options are on the table. We could see stations go away. We could see, the guideway move, if you will. So there's still a lot in flux there. But another thing that was very interesting is that she said, forget about Middle Street. That is not where this project is ending, at least not from her perspective.
Another thing on the table is a possible run for governor, potentially, from Colleen Hanabusa. She said never say never, and she said she'll leave it at that, but definitely ruling out a run for lieutenant governor. We'll see if there's any sort of announcement in the future. Of course, she is somebody that has held many political offices during her political career, and we'll see if there's any news that she will be making on that front. But great to hear from her. On Friday, we're going to be switching gears and talking to our prosecutor here in the city county of Honolulu, Steve Alm.
That's right. He made news yesterday announcing, or rather the day before, announcing that the Christopher Dede trial will not be held for a third time. They've decided not to pursue that case. Of course, there is the horrible case of the little girl in Waimanalo. We're going to be asking him about that and the charges that could be facing those adoptive parents, and also just about what he's seeing with crime rates overall. When we talked to him the last time, he's really committed to this weed and seed program, especially in the downtown and Chinatown area. How is that going? And what is he anticipating? Also, when it comes to juries and COVID, they had shut those down for a while. Jury trials now coming back. And what does that look like? So a lot to talk about with the judiciary. And again, we'll be talking to Steve Alm right here Friday at 10:30.
We'll see you then. Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii was brought to you by Chaminade University.